Hey guys, I'm a little depressed. About an hour ago, I finished Clockwork Princess, and I'm not sure what to do with myself right now. I cried so much. I actually think I cried more in this book than I did in any book I've read ever. Clockwork Princess is the third and final book to the Infernal Device trilogy. And even though I'm sad, very, very sad after reading this book, and not in a bad way, in a good way, the trilogy wrapped up beautifully. It's probably the best ending I've ever read to a trilogy. I think one of my favorite parts about the book overall is the fact that you could never predict what was going to happen next. I mean, nothing was exactly as it seemed. Everything had a purpose to it, and everything just wrapped up so beautifully that you could not be satisfied with this ending. I mean, there's not much I can say about this book without spoiling you, so I'm just going to get right to the spoilery part. What I do want to say before I start this discussion is that if you have not read this book, do not look at the inside cover of this book. Do not. It's a family tree for the Carstairs, Herondales, and Lightwoods, and I was probably about halfway through the book before I actually, took a look at it, and it didn't spoil me over much, but it did at the same time. So if you have not read the book, do not look at that. Look at it after you're done reading. On to the spoilery part of this video. We start out the book in Ammonius Starkweather's point of view when his daughter Adele is getting her first ruins, and that was horrific to read about. I felt so sorry for Ammonius Starkweather. I didn't like him in the first or the second book, I think is when he comes in, but after reading this prologue, I felt so bad for him that I started to like him as a character because I understood why he was the way he was, and I was so very, very sad to see him die. It was one of the deaths that I didn't see necessarily coming. And then it also tells us about Will and Jem's first meeting. I thought that was cute. It's, Will at the age of 12 and knowing what we do know about him, he was still a little butthole, but I love the fact that Jem just right off the bat just, took it with a smile and just became his friend regardless whether he wanted him to or not. And then we go right into Benedict Lightwood, the douchebag, being in the final stages of demon pox. Gabriel comes to the Institute, and when he sees Gideon, he's like, "Father's a worm." And he's like, "I know, your father's a worm." And Gabriel's like, "No, you're not listening to me. Father is a worm." Whenever you call somebody a worm, you don't literally mean a worm, but in this case, it's pretty literal. That scene with the fight of the worm and finding Robert Blackthorn's boot, leg, whatever, was totally disgusting and gross. But I do love the fact that Cecilia Herondale kicked ass. It's like, as soon as I read that part, I was like, Isabel. That is Isabel made all over. This was before I looked at the family tree, mind you. Am I the only one who got flashbacks to Alec when Gabriel kills his father with an arrow to the eye? It's like, bow and arrows run in the family. It's like, it made me think of Alec, and I was like, and it makes sense because after I looked at the family tree, that's his great-great-great-grandfather. And I loved before the battle with the worms started, where Tessa's like, "You don't think I can fight because I'm a girl." And Jem's like, "I don't think you can fight because you're wearing a wedding dress. For what it's worth, I don't think Will could fight in that dress either." And Will's like, "Perhaps not, but I would make a radiant bride." I cracked up so hard to that. I couldn't even visualize him in a dress, but it was so funny. I think I spent way longer than necessary laughing. We then have Jessamine's death, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like her as a character, so I wasn't very sad at her death, but I kind of wanted her to see her come back to the Institute and make an improvement of herself. But at this point, I read The Mortal Instruments before I read The Infernal Devices, so I knew Jessamine was gonna karaoke it. I knew she was because of the whole, spoilers if you haven't read The Mortal Instruments. I knew after reading about the whole ghost protecting the Lennon Institute that she croaked. I also knew that Jem hadn't died either, so yeah, that was kind of spoiled for me. I still cried when I read the part about Will feeling his parapetite bond being severed. I still cried about that because of the loss to Will and the way he really believed that Jem was dead. But I knew Jem wasn't dead. I knew he was Brother Zachariah the whole time. I did cry for the emotional turmoil everyone else had to go through. Going back to Jessamine, I loved how Cecily found, deciphered her message when she heard her tell Will he was a horrible Welshman, and I didn't realize there was a Kadar Idris. And it's like, okay, that makes so much sense now. He was technically in Idris, just not their Idris. Mind was blown at that point. I was like, what? Because I was thinking through the whole book, how are they going to find Mortman? How are they going to find Mortman? They're obviously going to be able to track Tessa after she gets kidnapped or something, and they're going to find Mortman that way. But no, that was such a beautiful way to tie in Idris into this without it being the actual Idris. And I love how Jem finally figures out that Will loved Tessa the whole time. And he's okay with it. In typical Jem fashion, he's okay with his parapetite being in love with his fiancée. And he even says that it makes what he was asking him Will to do even easier, to leave his side and go after Tessa. And I just thought it was beautiful. And especially the point where Magnus agreed to stay with Jem through the whole ordeal, and it was really touching. Then we have the point where Will is leaving, and you know, I'm sitting through this and I'm thinking, I didn't think of Cecily Herondale getting the ruby necklace and it passing down her line to Isabel. I didn't even think of that. It didn't even comprehend in my mind until Will gave Cecily the necklace. And I was like, yes, that's... I don't know why it didn't occur to me before about that. But I think, well, that theory was kind of at the end of City of Clockwork Prince and where she just showed up. And at this point, I kind of looked at the family tree that knew she was going to marry Gabriel. So. And then we have Henry and Magnus perfecting the portal. It was, you know, you read about the portals and the mortal instruments and they're just, you know, a regular thing in their life. And when I was reading this, I got flashbacks to all the times that Magnus has had to create portals or do stuff for shadow hunters. It's like he was there for the invention of the portal. I don't know how they do portals nowadays, if just a warlock can do it or if they actually need a shadow hunter to help. But it was just really reminiscent, and I love that. And it made me think of a couple other Magnus moments that happen between the books. It's like on page 260, Magnus says, "It is not my responsibility now, nor will it ever be my responsibility, to manage wayward shadow hunters." And then if you read in, I believe it's City of Ashes, it may not be, so don't quote me on that, but Magnus makes a sweeping gesture or something, and he's like, "Welcome to Magnus's the House of Wayward Shadow Hunters." I just distinctly remember him calling his loft the House of Wayward Shadow Hunters, and when I read that part in the book, I was like, ah! I was like, yeah, you think right now you're not going to be? Wait until 130 years, we'll see. And then right after that, it's like, after Gabriel gets done talking about whatever he's talking about, Magnus is like, "A very magnanimous statement, Gideon." And Gabriel's like, "I'm Gabriel." And Magnus waves his hand. "All lightwoods look the same to me." He makes that same statement to Alec in one of the books. That makes me think about Gabriel and how him and Gideon were supposed to spy on Charlotte for Council Wayland, and they're just giving him a bunch of crap that really has nothing to do, or nothing scandalous to do with Charlotte. All of it's fake and forgerized. And I love how Sophie offered to help them too, but it just made me think of when he was being bribed by Council Wayland after Jessamine's death, you know, to restore honor to his family name and all that. If he either found evidence of Charlotte doing something to disregard the law, or if he even fabricated something. And when I read the letter he wrote, I was like, oh my God, he's not actually doing it. Not after Cecily said she had such faith in him. And I was like, please do not do that. Please do not do that to us. Please do not do that to us. And I was so flippin' happy. I was holding my breath when he was dropping the bomb that he didn't send the letter. He didn't send it. Thank God. I could breathe easy again after that. The first time I cried in this book was when Jim was on his deathbed. And him and Charlotte were talking about Charlotte being the consul. And Charlotte's like, a woman consul after all the trouble I've had simply for running the institute? And Jim says, there must always be a first, said Jim. It is not easy to be first, and it is not always rewarding, but it is important. He ducked his head. You carry with you one of my few regrets. And Charlotte looked at him puzzled. I would have liked to see the baby. And that line just crumbled me. I'm actually tearing up right now. But it was so heartbreaking that one of his few regrets is that he would not get to see Charlotte's child. Yeah. And when we actually get to the part where they're naming the child, which I'm glad it wasn't Buford, but the fact that the last thing was Fairchild. And in the end, it also mentions how all the Fairchilds had Henry's red hair. It's like, finally, they're confirming that that's a direct line to Clary and Jocelyn with the red hair. Because I kept on thinking, I was like, there has to be some other relation here in the Fairchild line, but I couldn't find it. But that confirmed it. She was the consul, and they used her last name because of it. And then we finally figure out what Tessa is. Her mother actually was a shadow hunter, and there's like a whole big backstory that I'm not going to go into right now. But she is a shadow hunter, and the reason, and her father was a demon. And the reason that Tessa was conceived and didn't die, or was born as a stillborn, was because her mother couldn't physically, or she didn't know, her mother didn't know she was a shadow hunter, so she had no marks. So we're led to believe that the marks are what keeps these children alive. But you also have to consider that the Clockwork Angel on her saves her life. It was actually in tune to her life energy. So if we go with that mindset, was it actually the ruins that was the problem between demons and shadow hunters having children? Or was it the Clockwork Angel and the angel essence of Ithriel inside of it that kept Tessa alive before she was born? If anyone knows if Cassandra Clare has said anything about that, please leave me a comment or a link to it below, because it's been driving me crazy. Something else that's been driving me crazy is, why is the cat Church immortal? We see him, he comes up in Clockwork Angel or Clockwork Prince, I can't remember, and we see Church in the Mortal Instruments. It's like this cat is at least 130 years old. How does he live that long? If anyone knows, please tell me. I think one of my favorite parts about this book is when Will finally finds Tessa, and they have a little mourning period, and then they have Will and Tessa's sexy time. I'm not sure what the ship name is for them. And I just found it hilarious. And one of the funniest lines I think I was reading when that happened was Will is looking down at her. They almost got all their clothes off, and he's looking at her corset, and he's like, how does it come off? And I cracked up. I was like, okay, we know Will was like Jace. He was fabricating his experience. And then when the next morning, or whatever time it is, it's like, well, said a very amused voice, this is unexpected. And I was so afraid that was Mortman. But no, it's Magnus. Oh, and something else I want to talk about that scene. Magnus sees the star-shaped scar that Tessa's necklace leaves on Will. And they say that that scar is put upon you when you're touched by an angel. And if you guys have read the Mortal Instruments, you know that Jace has, and I think Clary has that same scar on their shoulder. Clary gets it, I think, after she meets Ithriel for the first time in City of Glass. But I think Jace was actually born with that scar. So is that like a thing that goes down through the bloodline since Will? Is it? And then, of course, we had the battle, and we think Henry is dead, and I was kind of afraid. I didn't know if Henry was going to die or not. But he's thankfully alive, even though he won't walk again. And we find out Jim is brother Zachariah. I already knew this, like I said. And Then we have the point where Tessa kills Mortman by honing in to Ithriel and her necklace and turning into this 20-foot angel and just kills him. And Mortman said if you kill him, then the infernal devices will stop working. And I don't know if she even thought about that or she just wanted to kill him at that point. But I was like, yes, he's dead. And it happened so fast. Like one paragraph, he was gone. And then we move on with our lives for the next few chapters. And this is something else. Okay, Ithriel had a piece of his soul trapped in a necklace. And then in City of Glass, don't know how many more years down the road, Valentine traps him in his cellar. It's like, Ithriel, what are you doing to get trapped so many times? Another sad moment was when Jem had to say his goodbyes to everyone, and it was just really, really heartbreaking that, you know, but when he said he would meet Tessa once a year on the Blackfriar Bridge, where he realized he was in love with her, that was so sweet, and I just loved it. Oh, I cried so much for Will, because he couldn't meet Will in this, and Tessa couldn't say that she was meeting Jem secretly. And then the epilogue comes up. The last 20 pages of this book, I spent crying. I mean, it was beautiful. You see them. It's a time skip. It jumps all the way back, all the way to 2008, after the events of City of Heavenly Fire. You are in Tessa's point of view. You learn little snippets of what had happened in her life with her and Will and Cecily and Gabriel and Gideon, Sophie, Charlotte, Henry, even a little bit of Magnus. And it's just heartbreaking to hear about all this, knowing that they're dead and gone and there's nothing we're gonna get to read about them. I think the last hours we will, I'm hoping, because I want to learn more about what happened to them after the events of the series. But I literally cried through most of the epilogue. I think I came up out of my tears, I think, on the last 2 or 3 paragraphs where Jem and Tessa finally got together, and then I started crying again because they're back together. Even though I knew they were going to get together, because like I said, I read City of Heavenly Fire. All of it was just heartbreaking. At the end of Clockwork Prince, I had come to love Will, and he had been through so much emotional pain, and even though he lived a long life with Tessa, to hear about how he was on his deathbed, and to hear everyone talk about all the things that they've been through with him over the years, and then Jem comes to say goodbye to him for the last time. And one of my favorite points was when the protections are put on new Shadowhunter children, and they would have no one but Jem do it. And Jem found out that they named his child after them. And I cried so much. I'm crying now when that happened, and it was just so touching and heartbreaking at the same time. And I really want to learn more about what happened after the events of the series. I'm really hoping the last hours are about them. If it's not, I will probably cry more. But overall, I love this book, and I really don't know what to do with myself now that I've finished it. Please tell me in the comments below what you guys thought of this book, what your most funny moment was, what the most heartbreaking moment for you was. Okay, well, those are my thoughts and feelings about Clockwork Princess. I am hoping to get over this book before Lady Midnight comes out, but I'm not going to promise anything. Until next time, guys, bye.